Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the latest episode of Tales from the Triverse, my ongoing science fiction, fantasy, detective serial. Today's chapter is called Unusual Friends. What you need to know is that Lola Stiles and Darrella have managed to escape from the Brullian Wastes and have now ascended towards the Peak. The Peak, 3202, Frostfall. The tavern hung from the side of the mountain, suspended above the plunge in a manner that defied Lola's understanding of physics. The city wrapped itself around the sheer cliffs like a coiled snake, spiralling up to the fortress at the very top. The peak lived up to its name, most of the city built above the clouds, and inaccessible other than by flight or the web of bridges and cable cars. Yawning again, Lola gulped as big a breath as she could. The air was thin, leaving her with the permanent sensation of having just completed a long run. She dearly hoped she wouldn't be asked to actually run anywhere. Carved directly into the rock and then extended with a wooden structure, the tavern featured a large terrace open to the elements despite the chill. The locals didn't seem to notice the temperature and were quite happy to lean on the guardrail above the precipitous drop into the valley somewhere far below. Not being able to clearly see the ground through the clouds did nothing to convince Lola that she wanted to be near the edge. Far better to remain further in, towards the building, where she could pretend that they were somewhere entirely normal. 3 days had passed. If she didn't think too hard, Lola could almost trick herself into thinking she was on holiday, a chalet somewhere in the Alps. Not that anyone would try skiing down the peak. There was no gradation to the mountain, hence its name. It went straight up to a point that was almost as high as Everest, measured from sea level, but without a gentle approach. She'd been told many stories by the locals. It was the blade of Unihex, god of space and time. It was the tale of an ancient dragon trapped deep underground. It was the one finger of an even larger hand reaching out from within the planet's core. Everyone had their own theory. Whatever the explanation, she found tectonic movement, most likely. It had resulted in a mountain that thrust up from the surrounding plains so high that it cultivated its own climate. "Here," Darrella said, arriving with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "That'll warm you up." "Thanks." Lola cupped it with her hands, grateful for the respite from the chill air. She leaned forward, inhaling the sweet smell, and letting the steam caress her face. "Careful," Darrella said, smiling. "If we were any higher, that steam would freeze to your face and leave you with icicles on the end of your nose." Jolting back, Lola eyed the mug with suspicion. Another foe she didn't understand. "How do you know all this stuff?" "What stuff?" "How to do things. Survival stuff." Darrella tilted her head to one side, which always reminded Lola of pigeons back in London. She decided not to say anything about that particular observation. "Hot liquid cools rapidly in a cold, dry climate. That's not hidden knowledge, Lola." "Okay, fair, but you're so practical. I always end up feeling like an awkward mid-earth city girl who needs her TV programs, sofa, slippers, and kettle." "And there's nothing wrong with any of those things," Darrella said, placing her hand on Lola's. Between her warmth and the wooden table, Lola felt a wash of comfort. "I've travelled a lot," Darrella continued, "to many different places, albeit usually in more luxury. You've not had those opportunities. You can't learn everything living in one city." Lola nodded. "That's why I always wanted to get out of London. I didn't grow up there, but once you move, it's hard to leave. You get trapped by the work." A squeeze of her hand. "You made it here, though, Lola. You made it to Palinor. To me." "I'm not sure that did either of us much good." She sighed, then gazed up at the tower of rock above the tavern, lined with buildings and walkways and lifts. "I'd have been arrested or long dead without your help." Taking a sip of her drink, Darrella shook her head. "Don't underplay your part or underestimate your talents, Lola Stiles. I wouldn't run away with just any random girl." Lola could feel her cheeks burning, so dropped the conversation. Matters were hard enough without burdening them both with her inadequacies. "So," she said, "any word from your contact?" Darrella stared out across the terrace and the tavern's various patrons. My guess is that they're already here and have been watching us for the last day or two, possibly since we arrived. Frowning, her eyes feeling dry in the cold air, Lola glanced around the tables. Everything was foreign to her, from the clothes people were wearing to the design of the furniture and building. Many languages were being spoken, none of them familiar to her. They're waiting to see if we were followed? Most likely. They have to be careful. Plus, they don't really know you. You're Mid-Earth Police, SDC even. Your job was to capture and prosecute people from Palanor. Shooting her a disbelieving glare, Lola harumphed. That's not quite how I'd describe my job. She sighed and ran her hands through her hair. It would be nice to actually have a job, mind you. Turns out I quite like having a purpose. I miss working on cases, solving mysteries, investigating crimes, and shutting down criminals. Every week working on something new. Making a small difference, one case at a time. It wasn't always that simple, but I knew what I was doing. And now you're having to find a new path without that structure. The scaffold has come down, and you're having to stand by yourself. Figure out who you are without the job. All right, Doctor, I didn't ask for a diagnosis. Lola slurped at the tea and was grateful for the warm liquid as it slowly spread through her insides. But yes, everything you just said. She had nothing to complain about, she knew. The others were back on Mid-Earth in a jail cell, while she was off on her adventures with Darrella. Then again, you were less likely to be eaten by a Vaksha in a London prison. Resting her forehead on her palm, she groaned at the unfairness of it all. On the table, drawn as if with a finger, was a word. It was marked out on the frosted wood by the absence of ice particles. It was in English. Safe? ? Darrella? Keep calm. Look normal. Darrella moved her hand across the table, as if wiping it for crumbs. The word disappeared with the brush of her sleeve. There were footsteps crunching on the snow-flecked ground, and someone pulled out a chair and sat at their table, placing a drink before them. A woman, perhaps late 20s or early 30s, with piercing blue, pale eyes, and a sharp glare that might draw blood, given too much exposure. Princess, she said, quietly, smiling at the both of them as if they were old friends. Her eyes said otherwise. You must be the detective? Hi? Lola managed, feeling decidedly unsafe. Slava, Darrella said, evidently relieved. Thank you for coming. It was a long wait, don't make me regret it. Her brusque tone contrasted with her happy smile. Any onlookers would pay them no attention. You said you were compromised. What happened? Give me it in a sentence. It wasn't me, Darrella said, nodding in Lola's direction. She was about to be arrested. We needed to get out. Slava frowned. Maybe she needed to, but why you? It was useful having someone in the palace, close to the university. We go together, Darrella said, quickly. And besides, Brulio was about to tip over. It wouldn't have been safe for me much longer. I see, Slava said, looking Lola up and down, as if assessing her worth. You're a lucky woman to have someone like Darrella on your side. I know. Lola started to extend her hand. I'm Lola Stiles. I know who you are, and put that down. We're keeping this nice and quiet. No big introductions. You'll just draw someone's attention. Darrella leaned over the table. I heard you could divert people's attentions. The silent shadow? Is that not true? Slava laughed and folded her arms on the table. If I'm walking down a street, sure. I'll tweak a few neurons, cause momentary blindness or blackouts, or mini strokes, make someone think they heard or saw something that they didn't. That's when I'm on the move, sat on a pub terrace. That's going to raise questions. Thinking through what the woman had said, Lola thought she had an inkling of what it meant. You're a micrologist as well, like Darrella? You can move small things? Both of them laughed, then said together almost in unison, It's a bit more complicated than that. Retreating, Lola wished she'd said nothing. Wielding wasn't something she could understand innately. She was relegated to observing, to watching from the sides, while everyone else on Palanor got to play with magic. The humans, at least. Maybe she had more in common with the Ainfa, never quite fitting in, always at the mercy of far more powerful people. "So what now?" Davila asked. "I've prepared travel for the morning. We'll head south and to the coast, meet up with the others." Lola looked between Davila and Slava. "The others? Where are we going?" "Into the wilds, detective," Slava whispered, with a knowing grin. "You're part of the rebellion now." Thanks for listening. You can get a lot more and check out some behind-the-scenes stuff, leave comments and all that over on the newsletter version at simonkjones.substack.com.